Allen Company and Big Al will be at the I-80 Truckers Jamboree. See you there.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Mark Redding.
It's not likely a surprise to anyone listening that some of America's bridges are in need of some help. Now, the Federal Highway Administration is sending some money to help set things right. I'll discuss that and more with OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. Ashley Blackford will chat about life on the road and what it's like trucking from up north to the lower 48 with Johanne Couture, OOIDA's board member from Canada. They'll also discuss some of the more serious issues of the day. And finally, what do you think when you see a long-hooded conventional semi moving down the highway? Marty Ellis wonders what it tells you about the driver who's behind that wheel. I'll talk with the man who drives the spirit of the American trucker. And now, here's Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Mark. We're going to run through a few quick headlines here in just a moment, but first wanted to bring in Landline Magazine's Mark Schrimmer to discuss calls for changes to the place people are supposed to go to file complaints with FMCSA about things like coercion, fraud, and unsafe practices. Mark, thank you for stopping by.
Yeah, Scott, thanks for having me.
We're talking about the National Consumer Complaint Database here, a clunky title for a system that groups like OOIDA and ATA essentially say is not living up to its promise, and they want some changes here. Before we get into kind of what brought this issue to the fore today, let's talk about some of the problems, I suppose, that are being pointed out here.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we start off with the name.
Yep.
It basically what this is set up to be is a place for truck drivers if they're dealing with their motor carrier for coercion, if you have broker fraud or freight fraud type issues, anything like that. Any safety issue that motor carrier is making you do, breaking hours of service, all sort of those things. You can go to this hotline or this online portal and issue your complaint. But the name of it is called the National Consumer Complaint Database. That should make truckers everywhere instantly know what this is, right?
Yeah, crystal clear.
So, it's definitely problematic with the start. Now, if that wasn't bad enough, that you have a whole branding issue and lack of kind of identity of what it is, even if a truck driver does learn about this and realizes this is the place for them to file this, as OOIDA Executive Vice President Louis Pugh said at a couple of hearings earlier this year, that this database appears to be for the place for complaints to die, because the OOIDA has helped many truckers file these sort of complaints and no response.
Nothing comes of it.
Happens. So, there's definitely a lot of issues and a lot of concerns here.
I shouldn't say I like issues like this, but I like when issues like this bring all the different sides together on the same issue. OOIDA, again, is, as you pointed out, has pointed out the problems with this. ATA, the same thing. And I bring this up because recently both filed comments regarding the clunky National Consumer Complaint Database title and the database itself, and essentially said, hey, we need to do something about this.
Yeah. And so OOIDA has really called out this issue for years and years. And I think back in 2023, the U.S. Government Accountability Office kind of filed a report and put a lot of issues and a lot of the problems that OOIDA has talked about for a long time out to the forefront in that report. Since then, there have been some notices on the Federal Register regarding kind of modernizing this database. And just this week, we saw comments from a few different organizations, including the American Trucking Association, the Truck Safety Coalition, Transportation Intermediaries Association. And so, like you said, that it's a good point. I mean, a lot of times these groups can be at odds on various issues, but they're all kind of saying, hey, this is intended to make trucking safer. It's intended to help, FMCSA to stop the bad actors as far as freight fraud and cargo theft and all of those sorts of things. And the ball is being dropped, and they're all seeing it. I mean, even though, truck drivers, are often referring to broker fraud and those issues that are going on, TIA, the brokers, they're saying the same thing from the other end. Like, hey, we need this too for you to be acting on this to protect them on their end, because nobody is safe when we start talking about these issues of fraud and theft that are going on right now. The bad actors, they'll make money from whoever they can. They don't discriminate in that regard. So this everybody kind of coming together that something needs to be done about it. Now, I guess the next steps really are just, how is FMCSA going to act? Is Congress going to do anything about it? Because OOIDA, in its kind of testimony to Congress about the highway bill coming up, that was one of the things that they recommended was a complete overhaul of this National Consumer Complaint Database.
Yeah, they essentially, in a perfect world, they would strip this thing down and start over. I don't know if that's going to happen. And to your point, too, even though this is an issue that, again, I think is a cause for frustration among many different groups and many different people, I'm not sure that there is a sense of urgency or a prioritization of this, within Congress especially. But the recommendations are out there. I guess it's just a matter of FMCSA kind of pushing that ball down the road?
Yeah. Obviously we talk about too with different funding cuts and staffing issues and things. So I think there's going to be some difficulties of getting some things done. But one thing that OOIDA suggested, and I think would be a real easy start, is just renaming the database. And the suggestion that they gave was the Truck Safety and Compliance Hotline. That seems like it would be a much better branding and identifier of what it is.
Yeah, the real name makes me feel like I should call them if I have a problem with my washer and dryer or something. That one makes a whole lot more sense. You can check out Mark's story on this issue at landline.media. Mark, we thank you for your time.
Yeah, of course.
And before we let you go, those other headlines we promised earlier, starting with a proposal from FMCSA to cut about 7% of its workforce. That's part of the agency's budget request for the upcoming fiscal year, along with a roughly 2% increase in funding. We'll have much more on this story in the coming days. And we've also got new details on a bill in Texas we've been keeping our eye on as well. It would have gone a long way toward tamping down on nuclear verdicts in the state. And while the Texas House approved it, the Senate did not before ending its legislative session this week. That means the bill will have to go through the process all over again when the next session gets started. And that's Landline Now News for today. I'm Scott Thompson. Mark, back to you.
Thanks, Scott. Congratulations to Dale Hadland of Beachville, Ontario. He's received the OOIDA Safe Driving Award for 38 years of safe, accident-free driving. That's the equivalent of a car driver going 285 years without causing a single accident. The OOIDA Safe Driving Award program is sponsored by Shell Rotella, and if you're interested in receiving the Safe Driving Award, you can find a link to more information at our website, landlinenow.com. Again, that's our website, landlinenow.com. Next, I'll discuss a series of grants to improve America's worst bridges with OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. And Ashley Blackford discusses cross-border issues and more with Johanne Couture, OOIDA's board member from Canada. We'll be back in just a moment with more of the show. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Penske is the trusted source for quality used trucks. Whether you search our website, call our sales staff, or bid at our online auction, you are sure to find the right used truck for your business. Visit PenskeUsedTrucks.com to view our inventory and learn more.
High heat and low lubricity can break your diesel fuel down fast. Summer driving means crowded roads, more stress, dust, and a bigger risk of costly engine damage. Howe's Diesel Defender protects from the inside out, cleaning, lubricating, and fighting injector wear. Visit houseproducts.com.
With rising costs affecting everyone, switching to a genuine Vibertech TVD viscous damper can help you avoid expensive repairs and downtime. Save money and keep your truck running smooth with Vibertech TVD. Recommended replacement at 500,000 miles or 15,000 hours.
It's not likely a surprise to anyone listening here that some of America's bridges are in need of some help. And now, the Federal Highway Administration is stepping up with some money to help set things right. Welcome back to Landline Now. This is Regulatory Roundup, and I'm Mark Rettig. I'm joined, as always, by OOIDA's Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. Jay, how are you doing?
Doing well, Mark. Good to be with you.
Well, good to have you here. And I guess the first big question here is an obvious one, which is how much money are we talking and where's it coming from?
Yeah. So earlier this week, the Federal Highway Administration announced at least $4.9 billion in available funding for major bridge projects, and then up to another additional $500 million for repairing or replacing bridges in rural areas. So going to be upwards of over $5 billion here through two different programs. The $4.9 billion coming from the Bridge Investment Program, and then the additional $500 million coming through the Competitive Highway Bridge Program. And the Bridge Investment Program originates from the major 2021 bipartisan infrastructure law, Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and really established a program to provide grants on a competitive basis to improve bridge conditions and the safety, efficiency, and reliability of the movement and people and the movement of people and freight over bridges. Obviously, much needed target area for improvement. I think we're still upwards of about 42,000 bridges nationwide are considered in poor condition. This money is going to be addressing bridges that are in dire need. Critical thing about this announcement for these updated grants are that the new administration is going to be removing some of the requirements that were necessary to win and receive this funding that were required under the previous administration, getting rid of some of the language that would explain how your bridge improvement program would, impact climate change, impact environmental justice. So the new wave of grants is going to be kind of getting rid of those initial requirements. And this program, as I said, been around here now for about 4 or 5 years. I think it had $600 million in 2022. It's got upwards of $640 million in 2023. So a major jump here in funding. Obviously, as we mentioned, critical need in terms of infrastructure investment and improvement. So these grants are going to be open, I think, through September in terms of when different states and jurisdictions have to get their applications in. So again, pretty common to see this funding announced, but a little different in terms of the requirements and the kind of regulatory red tape that some of it's going to be removed for this new round of bridge improvement grants.
Do we know any of the specific bridges that will receive grants yet, or are we just too early in the process to know that?
Don't have any idea on the specific locations of the bridges, but these are going to be for major projects in the $4.9 billion pool. Projects with total eligible cost greater than $100 million for awards. So these are going to be your major projects. Then, of course, the other $500 million will probably designated for more rural areas. So as with these discretionary grant programs, different localities and municipalities will submit their projects, and then DOT, FHWA will review the bids and then determine which bridges and projects will receive funding. Probably will be a little bit before we know exactly which specific projects will receive funding.
You mentioned the number of bridges earlier that are in need of some kind of help. Do we know how far this money will go as compared with the need that's out there for major bridge repairs?
Don't know exactly, but I think this is going to prioritize the bridges that are, again, in most dire need. And I think Secretary Duffy alluded to that fact that it's going to help address tens of thousands of bridges across the country that are in dire need of repair. Secretary Duffy, I think, made the point that America is building again. So I think this is going to be another attempt from the new DOT, new leadership, to get this money out efficiently, pinpoint which projects need it the most, and I think in some ways remove some of the previous requirements that were necessary to win some of the funding. So can always be a little inefficient when it comes to some of these grant processes. Hoping that gets cleaned up a little bit, but it's still going to take some time to figure out exactly where, how much of this money is going to be going out around the country. But we see this throughout a number of different, DOT grant programs. Unfortunately, ones that, we want to continue to see and continue to see specific designations for truck parking. We know there are some existing programs where we do see truck parking get awarded grant money. But until we have that Truck Parking Safety Improvement Act enacted by Congress, we don't have a specific funding source to improve truck parking capacity. I think we've seen over the past few years some of the successes of this dedicated grant program that goes specifically for bridges and bridge repair. Need some of that to expand truck parking capacity and build more truck parking spots around the country too.
Well, let's go on to another topic here, and this is one a lot of people would want to know about. Every year, CVSA, the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance, puts on a number of safety blitzes, and they say aimed not only at enforcement, but also education to help drivers understand what needs to be done regarding their tractor trailers. The next one of these up is Brake Safety Week, which sounds kind of obvious in terms of what it's about. When are we going to see this taking place, Jay?
Yeah, so we now know that CVSA is going to hold their annual Brake Safety Week this year from August 24th through the 30th, when law enforcement personnel in the U.S. and Canada and Mexico as well will conduct commercial motor vehicle inspections. As you mentioned, educate drivers and motor carriers about the importance of brake safety and provide brake inspection and violation data to CVSA, to FMCSA as well. Some information specifically about the 2025 effort coming up in August. As always, a focus on brake systems and components, but this year, drum and rotors will be emphasized for the brake safety initiative. CVSA notes that brake, drum, and rotor issues may affect a vehicle's brake efficiency, and that broken pieces of drums and rotors may become dislodged from the vehicle en route and damage other vehicles or result in injuries or fatalities to the motoring public. Again, this is an annual effort. The data, I think, it can be useful. I think we find out every year that the majority of vehicles, the majority of motor carriers, the majority of drivers are in compliance and pass these inspections. But, also important to emphasize vehicle safety here and make sure that all the vehicles and all the brake systems are up to speed and don't have to go out of service. I think looking back on last year's statistics, 87% of the vehicles did not have any out-of-service violations and were deemed safe and permitted to proceed on highways, and left about 12.8% that did receive out-of-service violations during the Brake Safety Week in 2024.
In a notice on their website, CVSA said something that caught my attention here. They said some jurisdictions are going to use what's called a PBBT, or performance-based brake tester. What are those? Because I don't think I've heard that one before.
Yeah. So this is a machine that assesses the braking performance of a vehicle, done through direct measurements of the brake forces at each wheel and axle, or for the entire vehicle. So some updated technology here that CVSA is going to be using. I'm not completely up to speed on the PBPT myself, but I know CVSA is always kind of, working to make sure that these tests can be, done more efficiently, more accurately. So they're going to be using this technology. Once again, they do note that the results of the PBB test are generally consistent with a visual inspection of a brake system. However, get a little more precise with the PBPT method. They say it's more objective and usually does report in favor of the vehicle during a roadside inspection or maintenance facility. So they'll be rolling that out this year. And once again, August 24th through the 30th for CVSA's annual Brake Safety Week.
Okay, well, we got one last topic and about 3 minutes to hit it, but I think it's an important one here. One of the things that the movement toward autonomous trucks has done is to bring some of these new companies in the business of making trucks or making the technology to be used in trucks. But one of these companies has become a target of concern. That's Too Simple. And the ownership of the company is part of the issue right now. It's actually drawn some scrutiny from a member of the U.S. Senate. So who owns the company and why is it an issue?
Yeah, so this is a name that may sound familiar. The name of this company is Too Simple. And back a few years ago, 2018, 2019, Too Simple, I think, was really one of the first companies to kind of make their mark in the autonomous trucking field, and kind of came about that, they had a lot of relationships and business holdings and connections with China. And as those relationships kind of got unveiled, I think the U.S. Commerce Department and some other groups kind of raised some investigations into Too Simple. I know there was some DOJ investigations, I believe, back in 2020. And because of those, they kind of, divested. There was a whole lot of shakeups within the company, and they kind of went back and kind of got out of the American marketplace. And I think most recently kind of got out on the autonomous vehicle space altogether. But now we've heard some more recent reports that when they were still kind of, involved with autonomous trucks, that Too Simple, they were penalized. They were not supposed to share any data with China. But it's been reported that once they were blocked by the Commerce Department, that they were still kind of sharing blueprints and some of their intellectual property with some of their Chinese investors and some other companies. So because of that reporting, U.S. Senator from Missouri, Josh Hawley, has sent a letter to Attorney General Pam Bondi urging DOJ to investigate Too Simple for potential violations of U.S. export controls, unauthorized transports of sensitive technology, and any associated breaches of national security. So once again, seeing some national security questions involved with some of these technology companies that are using foreign components in their autonomous trucking technology systems.
Okay. Well, Jay, I'm sure we'll follow up on that later, but we've run out of time for now. Thank you very much for the information.
All right, Mark, we'll see you next time.
I've been talking with OOIDA's Jay Grimes. Landline Now will be back in a moment.
At Truck Stop, we built a better load board for carriers like you. Sign up today and access over 600,000 loads on the most trusted online load board. Learn why the best in the business rely on Truck Stop to make more money and start driving your profit today.
Are you tired of the IRS following you around like a dark cloud? Call 888-557-4020 and get your life back.
Firestone's FD694 drive tire for long haul and regional applications now delivers 126,000 more removal miles than the Yokohama TY517 MC2. Contact your Firestone commercial dealer to learn more.
Landline Now, welcome back. Twice a year, the OOIDA board gets together to meet, and this year I had the chance to sit down for a chat with my fellow Canadian, Johanne Couture. I asked her about the many hats she wears and how she got started driving truck.
So I've been an owner-operator since 1998. I've been a driver since 1996. I've owned 3 different trucks, all of the same make. Currently, I'm leased to a carrier that hauls liquid chemicals and have been there for the past 17 years. Everything I've done from day one has been cross-border trucking. That's all I know. You talk customs paperwork, I got it all figured out. Like this is what I know. So that is job 1. Job 2 is I've been an OOIDA board member since 2013 and love being part of this association and everything that the association does for advocacy work, for making sure that government doesn't create burdensome rules for us, and being able to negotiate their way through whichever government is in place in D.C. And that is something that it is very valuable to be able to negotiate with government no matter who's in power, and being able to get them to see things clearly the way we do and use real drivers. Like our board members, our vice president is a real driver. He did this for years. So, and that has a whole lot of weight with lawmakers. My third hat is I am the executive director for the Women's Trucking Federation of Canada and have been there since 2016. And that is also similar to what I do with OOIDA. It's advocacy work on the Canadian side and building relationships with Canadian lawmakers and making them understand there again the reality of drivers. Like a perfect example was during COVID, we had biweekly meetings with the Minister of Transport in Ontario, and she would tell the shirt and ties to be quiet and let Joanne speak because she wanted to hear the reality of what was going on the road. So it's building those kinds of relationships that allows us to do better advocacy over time, over the years.
I'm curious, how do you keep it all straight going from Canada to the U.S.? As someone myself who, I grew up in Canada and then coming over here and working in journalism on both sides. I mean, it took me a while to understand even just like the language when it comes to lawmakers and, of course, the Canadian lingo, the American lingo. How do you figure it all out, keep it all straight?
You read a lot. Mm-hmm. When a lot of people spend time, scrolling through Facebook, I spend time reading through industry articles just so that I get the vocabulary in my head. Mm-hmm. I've been converting, miles to kilometers and back and forth since I started driving a truck. So you do a lot of conversion in your head. And I speak both Canadian official languages, so thinking in 2 different ways is sort of in my nature, like ever since I grew up. So I learned both languages. I was 5 years old, so I'm able to go back and forth that way a lot. But a lot of it is just reading.
My husband grew up in Iowa, and he knew nothing about Canada. He ended up going to school in Canada, but very foreign concept to him. And I know a foreign concept for a lot of people is crossing the border. Yep. Just in a regular vehicle. A lot of people have asked me, what it's like, and. For trucking, talk to me about some of the procedures and what that can be like.
So it's to me, it's a simple procedure. To someone who's never done it, it is complicated. But to make it understandable for everybody and kind of take an angle on the Arkansas language bill that's been recently enacted. So when I get a load, I pick up the load, and I have bills of lading, which everybody knows what a bill of lading is. But I also have customs paperwork. So if I'm heading from Canada into the U.S., I have a pro forma invoice. So that invoice has a dollar value of what the product is, how much it's worth, what tariff it's under, who's buying it, which can be different from who I'm taking it to, who I'm delivering it to, and who is shipping it, which can be different from who is actually the manufacturer sending it out. So I take those two pieces of information, and I also fill out what is called an ACE. So the ACE lists off who I am, what vehicle I'm driving, what's the plate on it, what vehicle I'm pulling, so the trailer, what's the plate on it, contact information, where I'm going, and all that information is filled out, and this is sent off, in my case, to my carrier's customs processing department. So they put all that information in the system. So they're putting in the system who's driving, what equipment it is, what goods I'm pulling, and what the tariff numbers are. And so if I have an LTL load that's got, I personally wouldn't have an LTL because I got a tank, but if it was an LTL load and there was 200 items on there, each line item has to be put in individually. That information is transmitted electronically to a customs broker. The customs broker will take what the product is and what the tariff code is and assign the proper tariff code. So this is where duties and taxes end up being put in the system, and the bill ends up being paid for that. That information is then sent from the customs broker to Customs and Border Protection, and they approve or disapprove the shipment. So when I show up, after all of this transferring of information is done, when I get to the border and pull up at the wicket, the officer there is, by pulling up my license plate number on the truck, it populates his screen and shows him who I am, where I'm going, what I've got, what equipment I'm using, and all the information on the freight itself. So, and the tariff codes, and then he or she is the final person making the decision as to approving me to carry on into the country. The magic phrase that I hear from the customs officer is, "You're all set." Mm-hmm. That's it. When I give that person, that officer, one piece of paper, that ACE sheet that I filled out, I give to the officer. The officer doesn't give me anything back. So when I hear I'm all set, away I go. Mm-hmm. So when I get to Arkansas and they want to, first of all, find out if I speak English, which is no problem. I had no issues with that rule. But they also want to find out if I'm in the country legally. Well, I have a valid driver's license, and I have a valid passport, and I have a valid fast card, which when I got to the customs officer, he got my fast card or my passport. That proves my citizenship. But I am now traveling as international commerce. I'm not under a visa. I'm not, there's nothing. That customs officer didn't give me anything that says, "Joanne, you're good to take your load to Arkansas." So that's where the law, the way as it is written, that new act is vague when it comes to Canadians, because I have no other piece of paper, no visa, no, you can call it whatever you want. The AED, the B1, the B2, none of that applies to international commerce the way it's being done now. So that is we're always told to, know the rules and make sure you've got every piece of documentation that you need to follow the rules. And this is where this gets a little murky if you get that one wrong officer that maybe hasn't read all the emails, about how to enforce this, or is having a bad day or whatever. We all know we've come across that one officer where you just don't see eye to eye with them for that one day. So it can make a good day turn into a bad day, unfortunately. And that's the problem with the way that is written and the way our customs rules are, which nobody's doing anything wrong, but there's just no way. If somebody says, well, prove to me that you crossed the border on that day, well, other than my ELD showing that I'm there.
Yeah, you don't have anything.
Right. Yeah. So, but it's not like I'm going to sneak across the border with, a chemical tank. down the dirt road. Like that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So
you also mentioned earlier about the proposed Oklahoma bill. Talk to me about that.
Which that one is very similar to the Arkansas one. It hasn't been enacted yet. And what happened with the Arkansas one is we didn't get a whole lot of time to debate that because it passed so quickly. So maybe we'll have a little bit of time to debate or give input into the Oklahoma one to try and maybe alleviate that situation or clarify. Like it's not, we just want it clarified. The way it's written now, it's subject to interpretation, and nobody likes to hear those words when it comes to enforcement of any kind. And the purpose of the bills, whether it be Arkansas or Oklahoma, is they want to alleviate cabotage. And cabotage, to explain that, is as a Canadian, I am allowed to pick up freight in Canada and deliver freight in the U.S. I can have, 1,700 pickups and 1,700 drops. That's all fine as long as it all originated in Canada and it's all destined in the U.S. Once I'm empty, everything I reload is the reverse. Has to pick up in the U.S. and has to deliver in Canada. There can't be I can't deliver in Arkansas and then go, my pickup's in Ohio, so I'll just grab a little quick load from Little Rock to Toledo and I'll go make my pickup going back. That is illegal. That can't happen. And we don't do that. Those who do things properly don't do that. Let's put it that way. And the reason for that, and I just had this question posed to me yesterday, and I thought it was the right question. Somebody asked me, why don't you do that? And I said, because that is taking work away from an American citizen, which we don't want to do. That is not what I want to do when I come down here.
Yeah.
My job is international freight, not domestic freight. And also and the retort of the question was, well, yeah, but you guys are losing money with that many deadhead miles. I said, yeah, but we rate our freight properly knowing that we are going to lose money having to do those deadhead miles. So, and which is probably the difference out of the way the Canadians do it versus how the Mexicans or South Americans do it when they're coming in, and there's more problems happening there. And the bulk of the problem for this Arkansas and Oklahoma law is from what's coming from the South as opposed to what's coming from the North. Because we rate our freight properly. Our drivers are paid very similar rates to what American drivers are. Like there's no discrepancy on, the cheaper drivers there. And 30 years in this business, that's never been something that's been a problem. So we do things fairly that way. So we, from the North, are not the problem. But the way the laws are being written it's leaving things ambiguous. They probably do this for a reason, but as far as enforcement go, it would be nice if it was just clarified because the Canadians... There's been a lot of news stories down here on the English part of this law, but in Canada, that hasn't been the news story. The news story is on how ambiguous the immigration part of things of that law has been written, and it's like we're all scared of ending up with that one wrong officer that's having a bad day.
That was Canadian OOIDA board member Johanne Couture talking about trucking on both sides of the border. For Landline Now, I'm Ashley Blackford. Stay tuned for more after this.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Landline Now. Welcome back. Every week, we check in with Marty Ellis, who drives OOIDA's tour truck, the Spirit of the American Trucker. What do you think when you see a long, hooded, conventional semi moving down the highway? You might think about how cool it looks, or you could be impressed by the sheer size of it or the sound of that old engine. But Marty wondered about one other thing that you might be thinking about when you see that old truck moving down the road.
Carolina west to Denver, up to Bangor, west to Austin, coast to coast, sea to sea, sail on, sail on.
Well, Marty, how you doing?
I am lovely, Mark, and you?
Doing very well. Thank you, sir. Let's dive right in to the discussion because that's my favorite part. Always like to say where you're going, but let's talk about stuff here. And you had posed a question a while back, and this is a very interesting question to me. When you see one of those old long hooded trucks, do you assume that the driver's an experienced hand? And I kind of do. I look at those and it's like, well, you got to know how to take care of that thing, so you got to have mechanical skills. That may be the truck you've had for years and years. But what brought this up? What brought this question to your mind, Marty?
Well, I'm with you. Okay, that's the way I've always felt and thought that, if that guy's driving a hood, he probably knows what the heck he's doing. Probably been out here for a while, been there, done that type of thing. And I have more faith in that driver just by looking at the truck. Okay. Well, the problem is, and what we've noticed recently, is that not everyone driving a truck with a hood has the experience that you and I have thought about, or a lot of people have thought about through the time. It's kind of like the same correlation with if you look at somebody hauling cattle or hauling heavy haul or even flatbed and open deck hauling, you think of them as being a little more experienced and better at their craft, because back when I started, you kind of started either in a dry van or a reefer, but a lot of people started in a dry van, moved up to reefer because you have more things involved when you're pulling a reefer than you do a dry van. Not saying one's better over the other.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just, but that was just how in my mind as a truck driver I felt. And then, okay, open deck, there's more involved there. Okay, there's strapping down, chaining down, all of that. And then also you go to heavy haul, there's a whole lot more restrictions. There's a whole lot more worry about strapping and chaining, and so many more regulations involved with that. And then there's also the hazmat. Okay, you have to know more. When I took the hazmat test, I'm sitting there like, okay, I didn't know a whole lot about it before, and so I just wanted to take the test to be more sellable as a driver. And this was before the most recent, where you have to retest every little bit.
Yeah.
But I just, I did it, but I didn't know a whole lot. And so I was kind of surprised that even after reading through the book, I did fairly well on the test. But was I ready to pull hazmat? Not really. I mean, yes, I had the endorsement, but was I really prepared for each hazmat load? Because if you don't have a company that's going to help you through those steps for each different hazmat material, okay, even though you have that endorsement, doesn't mean you know it all. And it's the same thing with pulling a flatbed or an open deck. Just because you can doesn't always mean that you should. And it's the same thing with, pulling doubles and triples. Just because you pass the endorsement doesn't mean that necessarily you want to or that you should, because it does take different skills. It does take a different mindset. And, it turns different. It handles different. So we can no longer, at least with what I've experienced and with what some of our members come in and talk to me about, you can't always assume that person has that extra knowledge by either the truck they're driving or what they're hauling.
That's interesting. And I've thought about the hazmat thing because, and I may have been hearing an urban legend from someone that told me this, that high fructose corn syrup, for example, is considered a hazmat substance. Well, there's a big difference between hauling that and, say, a giant tank of fuel that goes boom if you make a mistake. But they both involve that hazmat endorsement. But yeah, I mean, there's different levels of that, and maybe we shouldn't have the person who's only hauled the high fructose corn syrup move up to, say, poison gas, that, or some substance like that. Like we hear about these train wrecks that just evacuate regions. But
absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up tankers, because I didn't add that to my list, and it was in the back of my head because you have so many things going on with that. Let's just talk about the high fructose corn syrup.
Yeah.
It's because most of them, most of all the food grade are open bore, so there's a whole lot of sloshing, and you have to do a better job of driving. If you go and watch a tank truck driver, the majority of them, not all, are some of the smoothest drivers. And same thing with the oversize, because the wrong move,
yep,
you could be in trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. And you don't want to be in trouble with that stuff. Getting kind of back to the long-nose trucks, one of the first things I was taught here by Sandy Sonker, who used to be the editor of the magazine, was the blind spots. And we were just talking before we went on the air about a recent experience I had with blind spots, but not just the sides and not just the back, but on those long noses, you may need to be up to 10 to 20 feet in front of them before they can see you in the next lane.
Yep.
It's a whole different matter with those old long noses, and that's one of the reasons I hope that those are experienced hands, because you really have to. And again, I'm going off what truckers have told me, because I've had the benefit and luck, I think, of talking to some experienced folks like yourself. But you've got to watch who's coming into your blind spot and make sure they come back out.
Yep.
Because if you don't, it's hit the turn signal and say a Hail Mary.
Well, you know what? And you're right. Because there will be times that you're driving along and you notice a vehicle, and then all of a sudden it's like, where did that vehicle go?
Yeah.
Okay. So you really have to start looking around. And you're right about as far as how much room is in front. When you do the no-zone truck exhibits where you can kind of show people that, are blind spots, when you get one with a hood, you made it to where you can not see a car at all when you're sitting in that truck, in front of that truck. So if you know that you have at least that much space, and even with some of the slope nose, you still have, from the time that you can see, like if somebody's standing in front of you, the feet of it's like 13 feet. That's on a slope nose.
Yeah.
Think about a hood.
Yep. There you go. Well, Marty, we're running short on time again. I always love these conferences. I know. Happens every darn time. I don't know why. But any final words before you ride off into the sunset?
Hey, just be kind to one another and give that driver next to you a break.
Brothers of the highway, children of the wind.
Once again, that was Marty Ellis, who drives OOIDA's tour truck, The Spirit of the American Trucker. You can find Marty's next stop on our show and every day at our website, landlinenow.com. That includes truck stops, truck shows, and other special events across the country. Again, you can find that at landlinenow.com. That's our program for today. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
I'm a dad.
A son.
A husband.
Wife.
I'm a writer.
Photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars. Fishing.
My kids.
Chrome. And I am
a
professional truck driver.
And together we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us! Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.